In the early morning, Tatyana had a strange dream. It was as if her son, Alexei, was standing on the porch, knocking on the door. She woke abruptly, jumped up, and ran barefoot to the door, slapping her feet as she went. She leaned against the doorframe, feeling weak, and froze. Quiet. No one there. Such dreams often deceived her, but each time she ran to the door and flung it open wide. And now she did the same, opening it and peering into the nighttime emptiness. Silence and darkness surrounded her. Trying to calm her racing heart, she sat on the porch step. In this silence, a strange sound suddenly came, a squeak or rustle. It was just the neighbor's kitten again, she thought. And went to rescue the little one from the currant bushes, as she had done many times before. But it wasn't a kitten. Tatyana realized it immediately when she pulled on the cloth sticking out from behind the bush. The cloth turned out to be an old colorful blanket, and she pulled it harder, stunned. At the corner of the blanket lay a little baby. The baby was completely naked, apparently having wriggled out while lying there. It was a boy. Judging by his umbilical cord, which hadn't fallen off yet, he was brand new. The baby couldn't even cry anymore. He was wet, utterly exhausted, and evidently hungry. When Tatyana picked him up, he weakly squealed. Without realizing what she was doing, she hugged him tightly and rushed into the house. Immediately she found a clean sheet, wrapped the baby, covered him with a warm blanket, and started warming milk. She washed a bottle, found a nipple left over from spring when she was bottle feeding a little goat. The boy gulped and choked with hunger, then, warmed and satisfied, he fell asleep. Dawn was breaking, but Tatyana didn't notice. She was thinking about her discovery. She was over 40 herself, and in the village, people already called her auntie. She had lost her husband and son in the same year and remained completely alone in this world. She couldn't get used to her loneliness, but the bitter truth of life constantly reminded her of it. And soon she learned to rely only on herself. And now she was bewildered, not knowing what to do next. She looked at the baby, who slept, sweetly snuffling like all little children do. And then the thought came to her to consult with her neighbor. She glanced at the baby once again and went to Galina. But in Galina's life, unlike anyone else's, everything was smooth and calm. She had never had a husband or children, she lived for her own pleasure. All her men were passing through, whom she never held on to, and she didn't particularly care if things didn't work out. Now Galina, beautiful and stately, stood on her porch with a shawl draped over her shoulders, stretching under the warm rays of the rising sun. Listening to the story of the night's events with surprise, she curtly said, "Well, what's the point for you?" and went into the house. Tatyana noticed out of the corner of her eye, as Galina left, how the curtain in her window moved, meaning another admirer had stayed overnight. What's the point? Indeed, what's the point? Tatyana whispered. She came home and quickly got ready. After feeding the baby, wrapping him up, and packing some food for the journey, she set out to hitch a ride to the city. She didn't have to wait long for a car. After 5 minutes, a truck pulled up beside her, heading to the city. "To the hospital?" the driver asked, nodding towards the bundle in her arms. While they were processing the paperwork for the foundling at the shelter, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was doing something wrong, something against her conscience. This gnawing feeling in her heart wouldn't let her rest. And there was such emptiness inside her. It was the same feeling she had when she received the news of her husband's death, and then her son's. "What will we name the boy?" "What name does he have?" the supervisor asked. "A name?" Tatyana asked back, paused for a moment, and unexpectedly said, "His name is Alexei." "A good name," said the supervisor. "We have many such names here. It's clear whose relatives died, but for ones like yours, it's unclear who abandoned them. One should rejoice over the child, but here you are, abandoned by the cuckoo, not a mother." Though the words weren't directly aimed at her, Tatyana felt terrible. Returning home in the evening, she entered her empty house and lit a lamp. And then she noticed an old swaddle of Alexei's. She hadn't even thrown it away back then, she just set it aside. Now she picked it up and sat on the bed. Absent-mindedly running her hands over the old wet swaddle, Tatyana sat like that for some time, seemingly lost in thought. Then her hands felt a knot in the corner of the swaddle. Inside the knot was a small gray piece of paper and a simple tin cross on a string. Unfolding the paper, Tatyana read, "Dear kind woman, forgive me, I don't need this child. I'm lost in life. Tomorrow I won't be in this world anymore. Don't abandon my son. Do for him what I couldn't do." And there was the child's date of birth. Tatyana burst into tears. She cried and wailed as if for the dead. Tears streamed down, and she had thought she had none left. She cried everything out. She remembered how she got married and how happy they were with her husband. And then Alexei was born. Happiness returned to them. In the village, women envied her. Tatyana was radiant with happiness. And why shouldn't she be, if she had a beloved husband, a beloved son, and men also loved and adored her? Her son finished driving courses and promised to take her for a ride on the new car he was promised at work. But then in August her beloved husband died, and in October of the same year, her beloved son. And that was it. Tatyana's happiness ended forever. The bright light faded. And she became just like everyone else, like almost every other woman in the village. She would jump out at night and run to the door, fling it open, peer into the night darkness, and find no one there. Just the night rustles and the poor neighbor's kitten. She couldn't sleep this night either. She ran outside, listened to the night, and waited for something. In the morning, Tatyana returned to the city. The shelter supervisor recognized her immediately and wasn't surprised when she said she wanted to take the boy back, as her deceased son wished. "All right," said the supervisor, "take him, we'll help with the paperwork." Wrapping Alexei in a blanket, Tatyana left the shelter with a different heart. There was no longer that consuming melancholy and emptiness that had lived in her all those years of loneliness. Other feelings were settling in there now, happiness and love. If a person is destined to be happy in life, then they will undoubtedly be so. This is exactly what happened to Tatyana. Upon her return to her empty home, she was greeted only by photographs of her husband and son on the wall. But this time, their faces seemed completely different to Tatyana, not serious or sorrowful, but enlightened. Soft, approving, and encouraging. Holding little Alexei close to her, Tatyana herself seemed strong, as he would need her help and protection for a long time. "And you will help me," she said to the photographs. 20 years passed. Alexei grew up into a handsome young man. No girl dreamed of happiness with him, he chose the one whose heart matched his, the one he loved most after his mother, of course. Her name was Ludmila. One day, Alexei brought Ludmila to meet his mother, and that's when Tatyana understood completely. Her son had grown up, become a real man, and she blessed the young couple. The wedding passed, the young couple started their own family nest. Time passed, children came. And they named their youngest son Alexei. Tatyana became rich in kin. "Thank you, my son," Tatyana whispered into the darkness. "Now I have 3 Alexeis, and I love you all." The large tree by the porch, planted by her husband when Alexei was born, rustled, and ahead, lightning flashed like Alexei's radiant smile.